From the depths of desperation to the heights of financial freedom, we unmask the stories of courageous warriors who battled their money monsters. Join us to deep dive into financial survivor stories. Hey there, it's Carly, and welcome to another episode of Financial Survivor Stories. Today we are joined by a remarkable woman called Tracy. She has faced unimaginable situations, from losing her first husband to murder, to falling prey to a narcissist who took away her children, her fortune, and her home. It really is an honor to share her journey with you today. Without any delay, let's get into it. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Carly. Thank you for having me.
Where do we actually start? There's a lot of stories here. After my initial conversation with you, I thought this Wonder Woman has a story for 100 different podcasts. What do you think about that? Yes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I do. I actually do. Sometimes I don't know where to start.
Well, I tell you what, let's try and fit in as much as we can, just so everyone can understand your journey and how you survived, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose let's first talk about your first marriage with your first husband.
My first husband, he was the love of my life. We got married when I was 25, and we'd been together since I was 19 years old. He was working at the time for film crews as a grip, with the electrics and the dollies and cameras. And he got this big job over in Thailand, and it was a great opportunity for him. So he went. Just a bit of background there. We were in a really bad car accident when we were really young as well, and he'd received a payout. So we owned our home, we owned our cars, and it was quite amazing for us to be in Sydney and own our own home when we were only 26 and 27. At this time, we had a baby, and she was 6 months old. Unfortunately, I got a phone call that one of those knocks on the door in the middle of the night, and my parents were standing there, and they told me that Scott had passed away. At that point, we didn't know, and for a long time, I was told that he had jumped off the roof, that he had committed suicide. But when I went back with, I forget what they're called, the federal investigators, they said that there's no way he could have jumped from where they were saying that he did. So for a long time, I struggled with whether it was suicide, or I knew in my heart it wasn't. He was struggling being over there, away from my daughter and myself. And I did go over 6 weeks later with his best friend, and he had told me if anything happened to him to look in the roof. It was a false ceiling in the bathroom, and he said, "Look in there, because that's where I'll keep my money." And when we went over there, I asked my good friend to get up on and open up the ceiling, and yes, there was all of Scott's money that was in the roof. So
Wow.
he knew something was wrong. I don't know what it was. I don't know, and that's a whole nother story.
Of
Um,
course. Of
yeah,
course.
I'm
So he left you, how much did he leave you in the roof?
Oh, because it was American dollars, because it was a big American, I don't know, a couple of grand that was in there.
Oh, I'm glad
So
that you found it and no one else.
yeah, exactly. So, but it was interesting because no one would speak to me, none of the crew would speak to me, and I've since found out that they had a gag order on them. So yeah, it was fishy right from the get-go. So
So to this day, you still have I mean, obviously you have a gut feeling, but you've never got to the bottom of it.
I haven't, because um, I went to see the police, and with Thai police, it's all about saving face. And so I'll never find out the truth. But, his belt was missing, his sunglasses were missing, his wallet was missing. Um, and he played the guitar, and he had only just been to the market because it was their day off. It was a Sunday, it was the king's birthday. And he'd only just been to the market and bought a new guitar, and he'd been sitting with all his crew members playing the guitar and singing. And then they said it was literally 5 minutes later, and he was on the ground.
Yeah, that doesn't make
It
sense
doesn't make
at
sense.
all.
No, and as of course, he didn't have any financial, like, as I said, we owned everything we had. So, and he was the baby of 7, so his mother was devastated. He would never have done that to her.
Or you, by the sounds of it, the love of your life, probably the love of his too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah, and it was very difficult. So I didn't actually leave the house. My parents packed us up that night. We went to live with them. I sold the house, and I actually paid mum and dad's mortgage off because I planned on raising Michaela there. It was a big house, and I thought that was great. And my dad had recently retired. He was still young, but he had bad health, and he basically raised her for the next 2 years because I was useless. Like, I was just so distraught.
I think anybody would be useless forever. The fact that you managed to only last 2 years, that was
Yeah.
I think that's pretty heroic. And so you're living with the parents, and then after 2 years, what happened?
Well, my girlfriends took me out after 6 months, and it was the first time I'd been out, and it was at Randwick races. I'd never been to the races, but um, one of my girlfriend's fathers had a horse racing. So it was nice. It was a great day. But as we were walking in, my ex-husband was walking out, and he I didn't realize he knew my one of my best friends. It was mutual, and he took one look at me, and when my girlfriend introduced us, he turned around and said, "Well, I'm going to come back in then." And he was very, very charming, extremely charming. He seemed to hone in on me for the whole day. And we did. We had a really good day, and for for an afternoon, I got to forget what was going on in my life at that time. So it wasn't until later that I realized he knew exactly who I was. He knew my whole story. He knew that I had money, because our mutual friend was one of my best friends, and he'd actually grown up with her. So the closeness of the relationship was huge. So he knew everything. Everybody did know. It was a big story that
It's
when
huge. It's absolutely
Scott
huge. I
died.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you'd assume that you'd been speaking with, like, it's good for you to be speaking with everybody, but those people had told him the story. So this was after 6 months. And I'm
yes.
assuming that the money that you have was some sort of payout from your husband dying, or
Well, I sold the house, and then he also had, I think Super was fairly new, and because he worked for like Channel 7 or Channel 9 and all different companies, he had all these super funds everywhere that we had no idea about, and they all had death clauses in them. So
wow.
he only did one job for Channel 7, and they paid out $70,000. So, we in a way, he he left us very comfortable. He left Michaela and I very, very comfortable for that. I wasn't worried about my future at all, at all.
Of course. So this is 6 months later. So
I didn't
did you
start
start
dating
a
him then.
relationship?
No.
Not straight away, no. So what happened? What happened then? How long did that
I
take?
just went on with my life, and it was when Michaela was about 2, and my girlfriend, the same girlfriend, said, "What are you doing? You're so young." And the narrative was always, you have a daughter, it's going to be so hard to find somebody, because you have a child. And I look back now, and like, that's just not the case now anymore. It's just not. But this is 1996, 97. So, it still was stigma, single moms. And well, I'd been brought up that way. And I wanted a father for her. I did. I really wanted a good father for her because she lost a brilliant one. So I I was invited to this function. I knew that he would be there. He ended up not going. So I after the function, because I wasn't drinking, I just drove down to Balmoral Beach, and I called him and I said, "Hey, are you busy?" And he was like, "No." And then we met up the next day, and then we were inseparable, basically. And the love bombing began.
Nice. And from there, you made a life with this man.
Yes. Yeah. It was very quick. It was really quick. I was I guess I was numb. I was very numb. And this man, he seemed like he was coming to save my life, basically. That's what it felt like. That he, and I was being told, you're so lucky.
Mm.
He's willing to take on you and your daughter, and that was just constant, not from my parents, but from external people. So yeah, and I just found myself, 6 weeks into the relationship, he's proposing. I now know that that's part of a cycle. It happened very, very fast, very quickly, and
Oh, wow.
then
When you're saying fast, I thought you meant like a year or two, but 6 weeks, that's
mm,
heaps fast. Okay,
yeah.
so you obviously said yes then after
I
six
d
weeks. You
Well, I
really.
did. I couldn't All his friends, he came with great references, and one of them was one of my best friends, so that grew up with him. So I didn't think there was a problem. I did think he only dated models or actresses or really beautiful people. I didn't think that I was in that um, category, and he would remind me all the time of his ex-partners. In fact, I had quite a few of them at my wedding. Yeah, and that's a whole 'nother thing. He took control of the wedding. Most men couldn't care less, you couldn't drag them there, but he took control. It had to be perfect, and that's another thing that I paid for. That was $30,000, and back in 1998, that was a lot of money. We were the first wedding in the Hunter Valley, actually. It was just all about show. My whole And I just went along with it. I felt like I was living in a movie. I did. I felt like it was crazy. He made everything really exciting, and I'd lived a very normal, basic kind of life before then, and this was very, very exciting.
And after what you've just been through, losing your husband, this is a good thing for you. This is meeting somebody who's swept you off your feet and giving you the romance, being a father. So from there, you made a home together, or
Yes, we did. Before we got married, we bought a house. I didn't know that I was buying the house at the time. We were looking for a home, but I found myself one Saturday at an auction in a suburb. Well, it was Balgowlah, that I lived on the lower North Shore, so I never really went across. No one goes across the Spit Bridge, so either you live one side or the other,
yeah, unless you
and
got a passport, that is.
exactly, that's right. And the East is a whole nother story. Then again,
Yeah,
another
yeah.
bridge.
That's a flight.
Yeah. So and I was just going to see, how what we could get for the money, but his parents lived there. So that's, I guess, why we were looking there. And to be honest, this auction was going on, and I was sitting on the ground, and there were so many people there, so many people. Um, and I was sitting on the ground. I didn't even have shoes on. Like, I wasn't expecting to be buying a house. And next minute, my ex, he kind of taps me on the bum and goes, "Stand up, we're going to buy this house." And I thought, wow, I haven't even been in it. Like, I didn't even do a walkthrough because the auction had started. And so I'm standing there thinking, wow, what a great guy. Like, he's going to buy this house for us, and it's going to be wonderful. And it was cute. It was a little timber cottage, and it was gorgeous. And anyway, looking back on that, he just blew the auction out of the water, like, just bidding and bidding, and it's just such a narcissist thing to do, to be on show. And we won the auction. He turned to me and he said, "Well," I said, he said, "You're going to have to get your money out of your parents' house now, and we've got to pay for this." I was in shock, because I thought, how are my parents going to go back and get a loan now? Like, what are they, how do I call them and tell them? But he had signed, like he had, when the hammer falls. So I realized after talking to you the other day that that was the first red flag.
Okay.
And that's where the financial abuse actually started, I think, because then it
Yeah.
continued, and I didn't realize till after talking to you, it started coming back. And like, I owned a brand new Honda Accord that wasn't good enough. All of a sudden, we had to upgrade to a Jeep that I didn't pay for. He then leased that. So, and then that became a pattern of everything being bought on credit. And I didn't even have a credit card. I owned everything, always did. Even with my first husband, we never had credit. I'd been brought up that way. You pay your way. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So, so he, it just, and the mortgage, he kept refinancing, every bit of equity just kept refinancing. And I didn't really understand. I was too young. Like, I just didn't understand what he was doing. The other thing was, I remembered that he bought the house in his business name. So I wasn't even on, I didn't, that didn't click to me till the other day as well. And then we got hit with a land tax bill, so of 19,000, I think it was. And so then all of this was going on in the background, but it was always like, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. Like, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. But there was always, when I look back over the 12, 14 years that we were married, there was always drama, and it was always around finances. It was always around money.
And then you were
So,
made to feel stupid when you asked questions about it. Like, why are you worrying about this? You're the one actually paying for everything, but why are you worrying about this?
well, yeah, and also it would get to the point where, I don't know, we wouldn't have money, and then he'd say, "What don't you get that we don't have money for that?" But then he'd go and buy a racehorse that I didn't know about. Oh yeah, he had lots of racehorses. So then that became a real strain, because it was like a whole business. And I don't know if you're aware, but racehorses are very expensive to keep. You know, each horse was about, I don't know, $2,000 a week to just keep. Um, so there was just, but everything was on credit. Everything became on credit, because my money was in the house, and um, and I wasn't working. I wasn't working because I had Michaela, and I got pregnant very quickly also. Um, and that was something that they really wanted. But heading back to the marriage, it was also, sorry, going back to the marriage, to the wedding, um, the red flag was the first day that things were going to change, because he yelled at my sister through the phone, and I'd never heard him raise his voice before. But everything changed after the day we got married,
What was he yelling at her about?
because she wanted to change the plans. Um, He'd been out with the groomsmen playing golf and all morning, and because we didn't get married till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd gotten back late, and there was an agenda of when the photographer was coming to film them and video them, and then there was, and that we were asking them if they would swap, that if they could be done later. And he went off his brain, absolutely off his brain, to the point where um, we stayed at the convent in the Hunter Valley, which is beautiful. And I can still picture my mother and my sister laying on the bed in their robes, and she's just holding the phone up so all of my bridesmaids could hear him screaming through the phone at her. You can't change plans. This has been organized. Like, he was like a crazy man. And it was at that point, mum said to me, come out into the hall. And she didn't like him from the get go. She knew. She knew. And she said, you can walk away today. Don't do this. Just don't do it. I was like, "Oh no, mum, I've never heard him do that. I've never heard him speak like that." And her coming from a very violent, abusive household as a child, she had been ticking the boxes the whole, year and a bit that we'd been together. She could see the signs. But yeah, I should have left that day. I should have left that day.
That was going to
You
be
know,
a question later on, but yes, that is. The thing is, you never want to believe it. It's the first time he spent this time not grooming you, but making you feel like everything was going to be perfect. And did he get his own way then, or did you manage to change the plans on the day?
no, he got his own way.
No, he got his own way,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh no. And then the next day, the isolation started because I had been married before, and everybody comes back to the house, and you open the gifts, and it's a thing. My family, because they had all stayed up there, we were heading back to Sydney, and I had invited everybody back to do the gift opening and whatever. And he told everybody no, that wasn't happening. And
Why?
I don't know. He just said that he was tired and needed to get Michaela back, and I don't really know. I just went along with it. I just went
Yeah.
along. It was just I must have been so weak at that point that I don't know. It was crazy now that I look back. I just went along with it. I didn't want to make I didn't after having to deal with Scott's death, I didn't want to have to make any decisions anymore. I went
Mm.
into this period of my life where I was happy for him to just take control of everything because my life was out of control and it was clear.
So you went on to have two children with this man.
I got pregnant pretty quickly. That's all his parents would talk about. I must admit that they took in Michaela as their own granddaughter, and they're very good to her. Um, but they wanted a grandson. That was a pressure, huge pressure for a grandson. I got pregnant. Then at 18 weeks, we had, normal checkup. I had a lump on my neck. So my obstetrician said that he would send me for a blood test. Um, the next morning at 7 o'clock, another one of those phone calls, and I was diagnosed with toxoplasmosis, which you can get from cats. Um, so the baby, I had no choice. They didn't really know anything about it. It's so rare. Only seven, I think, only 7 women had been diagnosed with that up to that point. So the baby needed to be terminated. He had three bubbles in his brain where the parasite had been living. So that was horrendous. And then I couldn't get pregnant again. I had to get rid of the toxo. I went down the naturopathic way and I got rid of that in 6 months. And then I got pregnant again. So my body was just screaming at me. I was about 47 kilos, I'm 5'3", and my body had just been my brain. I don't think my brain was actually working properly. you know, yeah, talking about it again is tough. Um,
It's tough listening to it. Actually, I just can't imagine what you must have been going through. But was it happy when you got pregnant the second time?
well, I get really sick. So
Right.
unfortunately, with the first baby that I lost, I was sick for the first 16 weeks. So I'd only just come out of that, and he hated me being sick as well. Hated.
Because you weren't fun.
No compassion there. Get up. You can only help yourself. It was just I was so ill, and then I got pregnant again, and same thing happened, but this time I was hospitalized, and the nurse said to me that when I was on the drip, and she would take my blood pressure, and when he would visit, my blood pressure would go up, and she said, "Was there anywhere else that I could go and recuperate um, other than home for a couple of weeks. So I went
So,
to my
so, so can you get rid of your husband? She was
basically,
telling you in nice
in
words.
yeah, basically, I didn't realize that's what she was doing, but yeah. So I went to my sister's for a couple of weeks, and he would come and visit because Michaela had to go to school. So he would come and visit on the weekends, but he would come and then lay down on the floor and, say how tired he was and how, extraordinary, what an extraordinary job he was doing looking after me. And I should be so grateful. And it was just like, I am so ill. And as a mother, why do you need thanks? Like, we do this every day. You don't need thanks just because you're getting her to school and picking her up and, you know, anyway. So
So
then
yeah,
I
you actually went on to build a business with this guy though, didn't you?
yes, we then the isolation ramped up. He wanted to move from Sydney. My parents did move to Queensland. They bought a business up there. I really didn't want to move because all my friends were in Sydney. Everybody was there, and I knew my parents. It was a um, management of a resort, so they were working like 24/7. So I knew I didn't have support up there. Um, anyway, he convinced me, and we went up and we bought this place. It was 10 acres in Tallabudgera, which is near Burleigh, just at the back of Burleigh there. It's beautiful. Another place that was just all for show. I didn't realize it was out of our budget, and it was. And he told me that he had work waiting for him in Brisbane. He didn't. So, then all of a sudden his dad is paying our mortgage. And then I get pregnant again, tells me he doesn't want it. We're not keeping it. Devastating after I've had to terminate a pregnancy. Who says that to their wife? So, yes, we did keep him, but it was never the same from then on. It was just, it was really, really tough. And then we got this opportunity when my after about 2 or 3 years of struggling, which we didn't have to because he had a great business in Sydney. Um, then he got this good opportunity, and then we were offered to build this business with, anyway, it was a huge chain of childcare centres, and to take the photographs of all the children, like kindy photos, like school photos. And we got that contract, and over, I think, 10 years, it was worth about $40 million, the contract. So,
Wow.
yeah. So we didn't really make much of a profit because we had to buy we had three huge, well, it was 100,000 kids, in Australia and New Zealand. And we grew with that childcare centre. So when we first um, picked up the contract, we only had 70 centres. By the time the end of it, I think there was over 100,000 children. So we had 50 staff. I was the general manager. We had, a fleet of cars. We had three huge photograph machines. Yeah, it was just so over the top. It was a lot. It was a lot running a business like that and starting it up, having three children, working 16-hour days, um, and still needing to get to them, after school. And luckily I had a PA, and she would go and pick them up or bring them back to the office or whatever. Eventually we got a nanny, and that's just the way it had to be. But we were always together. He never kind of, we were always together. He always let me make decisions with him, but towards, I started realizing that I was making the decisions because with him, because if anything went wrong, then he could blame me. So that was a huge pattern. And don't get me wrong, when things were good, he was really, really good. But when things were bad, it was terrible. It was terrible. So
I
my
I
my
don't know how
job was
you've
to
held
keep
it
him happy.
together. I honestly, I don't know how you held it together for, I mean, how long are we talking? How many years is this
It
up
was
to now?
up to now. Well, when I left him, it had been 14 years.
So yeah, okay. So when did it all fall apart?
After the GFC, the childcare centre, they went into liquidation. They owed us so much money for work that we had already done. We paid $100,000 for the license a month, and we'd paid that the day before that they drew the line in the sand. So we were left with 50 staff and a fleet of cars. And so I just felt so responsible for everybody's, you know, yeah, responsible for everybody. And we should have shut the doors, but I just couldn't do that to my staff. They were like family. Well, some of them were family that were working. But then I just went down, like hit spiraled. I just spiraled and became very, very depressed. By the time January 2009 came around, because that was November 2008, yeah, I don't think I'd left the bed or my room for about 2 months.
Wow,
So,
and he's still with you, and you're still together at this point. Was
yeah.
he helping you through that at
Yes,
all?
he
Or
was. He was. He was helping me with that, and he was running the bit, but there was no helping because I was checked out. Like I was in that black hole. Probably should have gone to hospital when you look back. Shouldn't have been just sleeping in my room like that because I don't really remember much about it. I don't. I checked out. And that's when we applied for income protection. So for me, because I wasn't working there any longer. So we didn't really have an income. It's a bit fuzzy what happened around that time because I really wasn't functioning. I just remember that it was a terrible, terrible time of life. So,
I feel like your body shut down, just saying, right, that's it. That's enough now.
yeah,
You've been through so much. I am now leaving this planet for a while.
I
I'm
well,
going to sleep
it,
it off.
yeah, well, I kind of I did go somewhere. There was I think they still operate. There was a Golden Door up here in the Sunshine Coast, and it was like a retreat. And so I said I want to go. I just needed to get away from everything, so I went up there. And he wasn't supposed to visit because it was for mental health. I had extreme anxiety, but one day he made an appointment, and I had to come down, and I didn't know what I was signing. He said, "Just can you just sign these? It's to do with the business." And I was like, "You're not supposed to be here." And he said, "I just need you to sign this." Anyway, as it turned out, it was an extension of our mortgage. So the bank manager should have been there, or a witness should have been there. Um, and it was for another $250,000 on our mortgage. And I didn't know. So when we did eventually sell that house, I didn't know until then. And it was when the housing market was really bad. And then we were in default of 228,000 less. We sold it for less than we owed
Why
the
were you
bank
selling it? Where were you
because
going?
we were divorcing.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah.
you've now gone into divorce mode, which thank God I'm kind of sighing a breath of relief, but it wasn't
It
like that, was it?
No, it wasn't. And then we moved. Then it was just spiraled even worse. And we managed to sell the business, the income protection. Once that came in, it was a relief. And that was a back pay of, well, it was 10 grand a month. So I don't know, 60,000 or something. And his income protection started after that. So, but our mortgage on our house was ridiculous. It was $6,500 a month because we'd started off with we started off with, when we were in Sydney, like $100,000 mortgage. By the time this happened, our mortgage was over $1 million. That's how many times he kept reborrowing, reborrowing, reborrowing. So I just And I just let him do those things. And I don't know why. I was
What was
just
he
so
doing with the
conditioned.
money?
Living an exorbitant lifestyle. All the
Okay.
racehorses and yeah, I don't know. Everything was just on credit. It was just not real. Like we should have owned our home. The money that we were bringing in, we should have owned our home. We should have owned our cars, but everything was leased to the hilt. And yeah, a lot of it went into the horses. A lot went into horses, which I
When
had no
you
interest in.
Yeah, well, of course, that doesn't, even if you had interest, it doesn't sound like he would have included you anyway at that point. When I spoke to you previously, you mentioned the word the golden handcuffs,
Hmm.
and I just want you to explain that to everyone because I just feel like it's so relatable.
The golden handcuffs, it's one of the terms that I use with a couple of my girlfriends because we were in the same boat that you are married to the finance, basically. I couldn't see any way out. I couldn't see how I could survive because you're chained, you're literally handcuffed to the money, to the finances, you're chained to it. When you do unlock it, yeah, then the money still is chasing you. You're still being abused by the finances. So, um, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So,
So when you got divorced, what happened after that? And what was the crucial moment? Because I'm sure that you would have had a lot of moments where you thought, I need to get away from this man. What was that moment that said, no, this is it now. I'm drawing a line in the sand in this relationship, and I need to get out.
I was so broken by the time I checked out, probably a good 2 years before I asked him to leave, and he was just becoming more abusive, um, verbally, emotionally, terribly. I found his phone. I found messages to this girl that that he loved her, um, and then I had become so broken that he invited her over. I'm there serving her champagne and canapes, knowing full well that he's probably having an affair with her, and because I don't even know what I was thinking. And then that night, he asked me if he could get a girlfriend. And I know it's unbelievable, isn't it? And I said, "What are you? You're asking me if you can get a girlfriend?" And he said, "Well, you're clearly not interested in this relationship anymore, so we'll just stay married and I'll get a girlfriend." And I was like,
Oh my God.
"Yeah." So this is
What did you say?
well, I said no. I said,
Of course.
Of course not." But then he got really angry with me, and this is the way he manipulated me. He just made me feel so small all the time, so small that you know uh, no one, no one ever listened to me. Well, I never got to speak anyway when I was in his company because it was his show, always his show. So I became used to being very quiet. I was very, very quiet. Even at dinner parties and things like that, I wouldn't open my mouth because also, if I said the wrong thing, I'd get in trouble in front of people, which would be horrendous. You become a very good actress. You become very good at acting. You can be crying in the
Mm.
car and turning up at an event and smiling and having a great time the next minute.
So was that the catalyst to you leaving or you telling him to go?
It was Mother's Day, and he thought I was in the shower, and I came out and I was walking downstairs, and I heard him yelling at Michaela, to get the boys ready for lunch and go and get some groceries. And he was in his dressing gown, sitting there, on his computer, God knows doing what. He stood up and he kicked Michaela and called her the C word, and that's when I lost it. And I just said, "There is no love in this house. I don't want you here anymore. I want you out. I want you out." And he turned around and he said, "But mum and dad are coming for lunch." And I was, is that all you've got to say? Like, like it was all about keeping face, the show, keep the show going, keep all my shiny things hanging off me. And it was just like, I was, that was it. But it then took me 2 weeks to get him out. He just wouldn't leave. He just wouldn't leave. So, and he was just, yeah, by the time he left, I was broken even more. And unbelievably, then the day that he did pack his things, I'm laying there crying, saying, "Will you please stay? I need you to stay." And he turned to me and said, "No, I cannot." And he put his finger in my face and he said, "No, I cannot wait to watch you struggle." And then the next 4.5 years, he did everything far from killing me.
Okay, so yeah, this is when it gets really nasty, isn't it? So
Yeah.
he's really, you've made this decision, but he's not happy about this because now his show has stopped.
Yeah.
So everyone's now probably going to know who he really is, and he probably doesn't like that. So let's discuss what happened after that, because this is extreme, isn't it? So I suppose, where do you start? What happened? Because there is a lot here, isn't there?
He was fine. He finally left in June, but in July, he I had in July I had gone to my girlfriend's for my birthday, and he was still hoping, and I don't know, thinking that we were going to get back together. I had been very clear that was not happening, and a friend, happened to be a male friend, was there, and I'd met him, and he popped over one morning. It was the morning that my ex was dropping the children over for a weekend, and he saw this gentleman's car in my driveway. I wasn't expecting him. I'd only met him the night before, but he was just dropping over to have a coffee. It was so innocent. Well, that's when my ex went crazy, and it ramped up right from there. Threatened to kill him and went to his place of business, and like there was nothing going on. I only known the guy for 24 hours, and he then the money started, I got cut off from the business bank account. I got emails from his father because he all of a sudden very quickly made him the director of our business. I got an email saying that due to my mental condition, to these words, that they didn't have the faith in me to run the books anymore. That the car that I was driving his children around in was company property, so I had to hand that over. Just little things just kept, and it was just financially crippling. When he withdrew all the money from the account, he put $400 in the letterbox, and that's what I was supposed to be. That was basically my settlement, was the $400. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. He also emailed my landlord, told him that he was no longer going to give us any money, so I couldn't afford to pay the rent, so he should evict us. This is when I still did have the children. He was a sweet angel and let us stay there because he couldn't believe that a man would do that to his children, for a start. He called Michaela's school. She was in her final year, year 12, told them he was no longer responsible for her, and he wouldn't be paying the fees, so they should kick her out. Just so many things. It was systematic of what he was doing, to make sure that I didn't have any money. I didn't realize to fight him in the courts. I didn't realize he had a game, an end game, and I couldn't keep up quick enough with the bitterness, and I couldn't even I couldn't think up the things that he was doing to me. And I'd seen him, berate people before and cut people out of his life that no longer useful to him. I didn't think he would do that to me. I didn't think he would do that to me because knowing how soft and unconfrontational, I hate confrontation. But yeah, no, he used that then against me. He used my weaknesses against me. Maybe they're my
So
strengths.
what happened with the boys?
So then, while this is all going on, and he's not declaring any income either, so child support's not being paid. I had no way of getting, I went to Centrelink. I couldn't get any payments from there. So it got close to Christmas, and I went to pick them up one day. They weren't there. They just weren't there. He picked them up and taken them because there were no orders. It wasn't illegal for him to do that. But he'd planned it, in hindsight, when we look back, he had planned it to within an inch of its life, starting on December 1st when he called child support and told them that he was going to have 100% custody. And at that point, I had 100% custody. I didn't know that. Child support didn't call me. And so he was planning, for 2 weeks before he took them. So so he took them and he had them for 6 weeks and I didn't know where they were.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and they were only 9 and 10 and they were just babies. And he told them that I had abandoned them, that I didn't need them anymore. I didn't want them. So he did a lot of damage. He's done a lot of damage. And still to this day, the boys are quite, vulnerable and they have their own demons.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody would. So how long did that last? Did you end up getting custody in the end, or did you go to court? What
Yes, we
happened
went to
there?
court. It went for 4 years, and I was been looking back over all the affidavits and the notes, and 1 year I saw them 32 days. He would just make excuses, that they couldn't come, or I don't know how he managed to get away with it, but he did. And even with him having, an AVO, an ADVO, which the police took out on him, he was still allowed to keep these children because the judge said that I was basically weak.
That makes me angry. Why did he have an ADVO out on him?
Because of the messages and the emails. I was looking back at them over them this morning, and just in 2 days he'd sent 90 text messages and 14 emails, and they were all derogatory, just awful, like he's spitting words at me, and I didn't look at the messages because they're too painful to look back on. But if you're getting a barrage of texts and emails telling you you're an awful person and you're an imbecile and you don't, just go and kill yourself, you don't belong here, the children don't want you, if that's happened, if you're getting like 90 of those in 2 days, it's just overwhelming. And that went on for a year, maybe. Yeah, a year. I just couldn't stop him. So, and after a month of it, I took them to the police station. I printed them all out, all the texts, and there was a huge pile. And when I got there, the police said, "Is this from, the last 6 months?" And I said, "No, this is just the last week." And that's the first time when they took me into the room and the DV police officer came in and he said that this is domestic violence. And I said, "I'm not a victim of domestic violence. This is, text messages and whatever." He said, "No, this is abuse, mental, emotional, and you are, and this is the way we're going to treat it, and we are going to take out the ADVO." So they did, and he thought that was the greatest joke, and it never stopped him. Never stopped him. Nothing. I kept turning up, showing them the messages and the emails, and really, there was nothing that I don't know why they'd never arrested him. I think today they probably would, but back then, this is 2012. It wasn't. It had just been brought in, that law of the financial and the what's the coercion? The I'm not
Yeah.
sure what it's called, but that had all just been brought in. So it was very new, and the police officers weren't trained. You know, they weren't trained properly. So yeah,
What did that do to your mental health over that 4 years of trying to fight for your children? I can't imagine how painful that would have been.
it was
What did that do? What happened?
it was so painful, and I just into what but I could see the pain the boys were in, and Michaela was in, and he didn't care. He just kept going, and it wasn't until I had some therapy, and we, I couldn't do it to the kids anymore. And my therapist told me the story of Solomon, and I didn't know that story about cutting the baby in half, and I just didn't know that story. And the two
What was the
women,
story?
well, the story of Solomon is there's two women. They both say that the baby is theirs, and when Solomon said to them both, "Well, then I'll just cut the baby in half," one of the women said, "We'll give it to her. Then don't hurt the baby." And it was then that Solomon knew who the real mother was. So because she had, you know, sacrificed herself and given the baby to not the real mother.
Oh, I just got goosebumps about that. That's so sad. So you did, so that's what you did.
I
That just brought a tear to my eye. So that's what you did. You decided that you were no longer going to fight in order to save them. That's what
Yeah,
you
I
decided.
just we went to the court for the final time, and they were about to read out the report, and I said to my lawyer, I can't do this to them anymore. I just can't, because if they did give me custody, he would have gone he would have kept going. He just would have kept going until he won. And I couldn't do that to the boys. So yeah, I gave them up basically.
You saved them. That's what you did at that point, and that was the right decision for you. So your mental health, I think you ended up in rehab. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that where
twice.
you got the therapy?
Yes,
Okay.
I've had so much therapy, and you know, with domestic violence counselors, amazing, just therapy, therapy, therapy. I can't say enough about it with the right therapist, though.
Yes, of course. This is something that gets mentioned a lot. People seem to give up on therapy a little bit when they go to the wrong one and they don't continue trying. But it's very good to keep going, isn't it? And
It
finding.
is.
So, who did you find worked for you? Because I feel like you obviously you went to the rehab. Was it there, or was it like a separate?
Oh, I'd been having therapy for a long time, and I had a psychiatrist. I was on medicate. I'll be on medication for the rest of my life because so much damage has been done, irreparable. And yeah, I was having therapy like maybe twice a week. It's hard. Like you go to meet someone and you're like, oh, so if you don't feel that connection straight away, don't stop. Just keep trying to find that one person. And when you do find that one person, it's great because you I was on death's door. I feel like he was trying to kill me by making my life the worst imaginable that he could. So killing me from a distance. And it's interesting. My daughter pointed out, they track domestic violence and women that have been killed physically. What about the women that don't make it like I did? What about those women that their husbands make their lives so miserable that they do end their lives? They're not tracking that. That was an interesting
Yeah.
point of view, I thought.
There's actually, statistically speaking, it's a very high number of people that do that, women, but there's such a high number of people that actually have never told anybody about the abuse. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So the statistics show that it's very difficult to even do a statistic on it, because they don't have enough information, because people don't actually come forward. And that's, it's really interesting, like, we're having conversations like this because, financially you are abused, inside and out, mentally as well. And it's good to be able to talk about it, because there is ways out. One for you was obviously the therapy. But there was other things that you guys did as well. So your daughter, I mean, because throughout this period you've been cut off financially, so you couldn't have a car or a home, even though you built everything, and you've paid for everything so far, and you built the business. You've now got nothing. So your daughter had to stand up, didn't she, at one point?
Yes.
Like this, I absolutely, I've never met her, and I absolutely love her. She obviously is taking some strength from you. But so what did she do? Because
she became the rock. She was just and she is still a little pocket rocket, but she became the rock. And she was doing she finished school. We managed to win that in court so that she wasn't thrown out. But imagine doing a year 12 and knowing someone is like literally trying to have you kicked out of school. She did very well, actually. So then she went to uni, and she had 2 jobs so that we could pay the rent, and we had no other choice. And I couldn't get a credit card, so she got credit cards in her name, and that's how we were living, off credit cards and her job. And she handed over every single cent that she earned. And when we did see the boys, they usually turned up in looking like they were homeless. So we pop them in the car and take them to Kmart and spend what little we did to, buy them socks or t-shirts, or, in the winter, he'd send them over on the ferry, and, they'd be in just a t-shirt. They wouldn't have a jacket. And I could tell that he was not caring for them, but there was nothing I could do about it. It was just nothing I could do about it. He wouldn't send them he wouldn't send them on the Sunday if I hadn't sent the $5 ferry fee the week before. That was his excuse to not send them. So even then, still using money to control me, even when the court had said that he's got them now, and I'm only getting them every second weekend.
So how much credit card debt are you guys racking up now? Because if you're paying just for normal things like groceries, that's easily quickly spent, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And by this stage, I was put on a disability pension because of my mental health. And so we had that. We had Michaela's youth allowance because she was at uni. And we had the credit card. So we had racked up, all in total, by the time it was out of control, about $30,000. So it might have been more. I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot. And to me, that was, when you're on a pension and your child's working, 2
No, it's
jobs.
huge.
That was very scary, and we didn't know how. It got to the point where we just didn't know how we could even manage the minimum monthly payments, because at this point they had cut off my income protection, and I was fighting for my TPD, my total and permanent disability, because once the government had said that I was TPD, basically with a disability pension, it should have been easy. But then that became another struggle that lasted for nearly 10 years.
So you got a TPD payout from where? Your super, or
2 super funds. Yeah.
okay.
No, one private and one was in my super. Yeah. So
But before this,
before that, I'm fighting that with a different lawyer that was,
It's taken 10 years.
yeah,
This is a long period of time,
yeah,
right? So,
yes,
because at one point you went to a place I noted down called, which I really wanted to highlight on here,
yeah,
because I think these people saved you guys, didn't they? Was it
they did.
Wesley Mission?
Yes, it was the Wesley Mission and it was in Sydney. And I was listening to your first podcast and noticed it was the gambling podcast. And that's it. Back then, it was the only way that they could actually look after us if it was linked, the financial abuse was linked to gambling. And I forgot to tell you that. And I said,
Wow.
well, he has racehorses and he gambles. And she was like, oh, good. Okay, great. Then we'll go down that route. so,
Right. Okay.
so they specialize in helping women, get out of gambling, or getting people out of gambling debts. It's not just women, it's men also. But if you've been abused by it. But anyway, going back to that, it was about 30,000, and it was interesting for them, for our counselor, our financial counselor, because they'd never come across when the abuse had trickled down to affect the child. And the child, I'm sure there's many children that have had to do this, but it was the first case that they'd come across. So they didn't actually know how they were going to approach the banks, and what the banks would say. Fortunately, the banks came back pretty much straight away, all of them, and cleared the debts.
They
So
actually sent you something nice, didn't they? The
yeah,
banks.
especially Virgin, they sent a really lovely letter saying that sorry that we'd gone through this. I mean, it was generic, but it was more than we expected. We were fully expecting them to come back and say, oh, no, no, sorry, you're going to have to pay this, or reduce it or something. Never expected for every single one of them to waive it, just straight out waive it. And also remove the the black mark on our credit rating. So they took it off, which was fantastic.
So you were the one with the black marks. That's why you couldn't get credit, right? So they took that off.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So they've basically put you in a better position.
Yes.
So these financial counselors. So it's incredible, and people just don't voice when they're in trouble. Sometimes just speaking to somebody, obviously you spoke to a financial counselor, just speaking to somebody and getting some advice from somebody, that no one has to struggle alone, but you do have to be voicing your problems to somebody. But do they protect you? Because I know obviously some people will be in a position where they actually physically, they could get harmed by discussing the financial abuse with someone. Do they protect? Is there any way of protecting that person as well, or how would that work?
Well, I'm sure that they would put you in contact. Because they deal, Wesley, Salvation Army, they all have connections with people that they can send you to, like, just beginning with the ADVO. Then the police put me in contact with, Bondi Cottage, which was the place where I got therapy and the children got some art therapy. And it just becomes like a bit of a domino. You just have to make one phone call, and that domino effect will start. Someone will suggest something or refer you somewhere. And that's how we found out about the Wesley Mission. I can't remember exactly how we did find out, but I was already in that circle. So of doing 6-week DV courses and that kind of thing, and meeting other women. So it would have just been in passing conversation, but you have to pick up the phone. You have to be strong and not ashamed of it either. There's a great deal of shame that comes from not having any money when you look at the world these days, and it's just everything is revolving around money and who's got it and who hasn't. So you have to pick up the phone and get help. And it, yeah, she saved us. That counselor, she really saved us. So But Michaela just continued going to uni, doing her 2 jobs, and we obviously didn't get into trouble. I got another lawyer, and a specialized lawyer that goes for TBT people, because they know that they're never going to pay you out unless you've got a lawyer. That's insidious in itself. That's a whole nother podcast. And and we won, and I received the money. I was able to pay mum and dad back the money that my ex had taken from them, which was 250,000. Michaela didn't know, but I was keeping count of every single cent that she had given me over those years. So I was able to give her back every single cent, which was $80,000. And the car that this is stupid. This is one of those things. The car that he took from me I loved it. It was my Audi Q7. So I went out and bought an Audi Q5. That was the first thing I did, because he took my car from me. But this time I owned it, and it was 4 years old, but I owned it, and no one can take it away from me. So that was a bit of like, get fucked.
Yeah. Did you send him a picture? No, let's not contact him. That's probably not a good way.
No.
So I'm interested in, what advice would you give to somebody who's in an abusive relationship?
To pick up a phone, tell a friend, tell your friend. I didn't tell anybody. And because they're so charming on the outside, nobody believed me. Nobody believed me.
When you
So
finally came out and said
yeah,
something.
yeah. So I lost all of my friends, 20-year relationships, and they still speak to him, which is crazy, but that's how good he is. That's how great these men are. Not just men, there are women like it as well. These narcissists they all read from the same book, drink from the same cup. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like we're all married to this one man. So I would just give the advice, go with your gut. Just there was so many times, like that day, my wedding day, I should have left. I should have left. That was a gut moment. And when I heard him yelling down the phone, financially, get your name off a joint account, get your name off those joint accounts. Financially, siphon away a bit of money and keep it for yourself. Always have an exit plan. And don't hand over your money. Don't hand it over. You keep your money. It would have been a very different situation if I didn't make a joint account. My daughter is very savvy now. It's sad because we don't trust anybody anymore. You can't trust anybody. So she's in a wonderful relationship. She has a beautiful, beautiful man. But she won't ever have a joint account. I'm sure of that. And she makes more money than him, and that's great. But she won't ever hand her pay packet over. I know that for sure. So, and don't get a credit card.
With your name on it. They can get
Yes.
one,
Yes.
but don't put your name on it. And if your name is on it, then try and get it off somehow.
Yeah.
I think like some of the takeaways, I think definitely the financial counselor, speaking to someone like Wesley Mission, who can help with giving you guidance. And like you said, one door actually opens another door, because everyone's situation is slightly different. Just picking up that phone, but definitely speaking to friends. You must have felt so isolated and alone when you didn't need to feel like that, right? So
yeah. Yes, I did. And I still do. I find it really, really difficult I've only got like 2 girlfriends, and because mainly one of them went through a very similar thing at exactly the same time. Hers wasn't as brutal, but because her ex-husband wasn't as vile. but I don't trust. It's there's no happy ending here. There is financially, I'm stable, but mentally and emotionally, it's it's not a happy ending, really.
How do you deal with all of this on a day to day?
Um, I have my dog who's here, and I love him to bits. He's my main man.
He can't even
And
leave you alone for a podcast, so
no,
he
he
obviously loves you back.
he's having a stretch right now. Um, and I've got my kids, and that's what my psychiatrist always said to me. He said it will swing around, and they will recognize what has happened, and they will be with you when they're older. And yes, I get them for Chris. Yes, they're here. One of them's living with me. The other one, my youngest is living with my daughter at the moment. And they're working through their own issues at the moment.
What age did they come back?
My eldest son, he came to me when he was 13. He ran away. Um, Unfortunately, he kept my baby until he didn't need him any longer and sent him back to me at 15 when all
Right,
the
okay. So that's really interesting. So they came back to you, which was always obviously going to be the case. As soon as they grew the strength and the ability to do that, that was always going to be that. Obviously probably wasn't in your forecast, was it? The things that he was putting you through, but obviously they came back to you, which is great. But so because he had custody, could he have just got them back, or because they ran away they were able
um,
to stay with you? How does that work?
apparently, even though there's orders, the police won't force them after the age of 14. They say that the kids can vote with their feet. I don't know if that's the same now, but pretty much you can't, some kids at 14, they're 6 foot tall. How can you pick them up physically and put them in a police car? So that's when, um, yeah, Cooper ran away and he was not going back. He just wasn't going back. So, and I don't know why my ex just let him stay, but he did other things to then, torture us and torture my son. Made him go to school, in Manly when I was living in the East, and, just wouldn't let me put him in a school, use those court orders to keep him, you know. So these are the things that he didn't care about the kids, didn't care that, my eldest had to catch a ferry every morning and, evening, and he was only 13 years old, and he didn't care. It was all about winning. He just needed to win.
And
So
I think that's, obviously now there is I think, I mean, for me, I'm listening to it and I feel like it's a better ending than what could have happened. Like now you've got your own you're financially stable on your own. You own your own home, you own your own lovely car. Do you still have your Audi now?
yeah, I do.
Lovely.
I
Love
love
it.
it.
And now you have your family back, but the problem is it has left a long road of emotions that now need to be dealt with. And kids aren't meant to go through things like this. I mean, adults don't even know how to deal with it, let alone kids. And
No.
obviously they are going to take it through into their adult life. That's, it goes without saying, but they now have their mummy back, which is and has always been the best place for them. I actually think you're incredible. Every time I have a different podcast, I'm going to invite you back on because I feel like there's definitely elements of your story that we could have gone and delved way more. Is there anything that you would say to your younger self now at this point, going through what you've been through, learning what you've learnt? Is it just that wedding day that you would have turned around, or is there something that you would have said to yourself back then to try and not have gone through all of this pain?
I would have liked to have been, I guess I would say to myself, be stronger, be stronger, listen to your own intuition. Um, I do now. I do now. Um, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be by yourself either. You don't need a man. Like, I know that for sure now. I don't need a man. it's nice to have a companion, but and it's nice to be wanted and needed, but I don't, yeah, I would say to myself, don't settle. Don't settle.
Okay, I love that. And as a fun question to end the podcast, as a fun question to end the podcast, I'm going to ask you what you think your superpower is.
Oh, my daughter.
Oh, really? Your superpower is your daughter?
Yeah. I think she, yeah, she's my superpower. Like, she's the opposite to kryptonite for Superman. She's my superpower.
I think we better get her on. I think that she's probably got a lot of stories to tell throughout this journey. She's obviously stood by your side. It's beautiful. It's lovely. You know,
Yeah,
you've obviously got a really nice relationship.
we have a great relationship. She's my best friend. We talk every day. I, I see her probably once a month, even though she lives in Sydney and I live here. I've just spent the weekend with her. Yeah, she's the love of my life. She really is. She's such a good human being.
Well, Tracy, I think that you've navigated so many ups and downs. I honestly think that you are one tower of strength, to be quite honest. I think personally you're a testament to the power of determination.
Thank you. Thank you. I used to say no, I'm not, but when you say it out loud and everything that I have been through, I don't know how I'm still here. I don't know, but I really don't think I would be if it wasn't for Michaela's strength as well, and my parents. My parents were an amazing, and that's why I say tell somebody. Just tell somebody, because it's amazing what you can. It's amazing what you can go through with a bit of help, with just a little bit of help.
Yeah, 100%. And I hope that we've actually inspired whoever is listening to this to take control of their own financial situation and actually to seek help if they're experiencing any financial abuse, and to make sure that you follow us for more inspiring stories like this one. And I always like to finish something off, but I think no one is perfect. You know, we're all working on the best versions of ourselves. And I think you've done a really bloody good job of that.
Oh, thank you.
Well done.
Thank
Tracy,
you.
well
Thank
done.
you so much.
Thank you for sharing your story, and let's get it out there. Thanks, Tracy.